Hello everyone, and thank you for being here today. This many, it's a real pleasure to be able to present to you today the fruit of 5 years of research, even though I just joined the project a year ago in the final stage of it. And as you will discover through the morning, 3 branches emerged from the ADOCHS project. First, and as Tan presented it, he worked on the improvement of the image by the development of algorithm mathematical, while my colleague Anne Chardonnens will work and present to you our work on metadata improvement. As for myself, I am in between of the two, because I was charged of create a document gathering the research carried out by the team during the project, and more broadly to develop a guide of best practices for the management and quality control of a heritage and documentary digitization project. It is therefore a more methodological approach and practical, while at the same time promoting current research on the subject. This guide is initially intended for the Federal Scientific Digital Services, but hope it will be more widely distributed in Belgium. A really quick evolution of the guide elaboration through the different years of the project. First, a state-of-art of digitization practices was carried out at the State Archives and the Royal Library of Belgium. This project was carried by a few persons, and I'm the second one actually. My colleague from KBR, Nicolas Roland, first made the state of art and the analysis of the specialized literature. Florence Gillet also contributed to the guide, and finally I'm the last person to come, because I was in charge in the last period of the project through the whole year to summarize, to create this summarized document and to update the research that were made for the last 4 years and create a methodological framework for ensuring the quality of digital data at each stage of the process. In order to respond more accurately to the difficulties encountered, this guide combines a theoretical and a practical approach. Theoretical because it covers a certain numbers of prerequisites necessary for a global view of digitization, and referring to the current research on the subject, existing resources, as well as the research carried out by Tan and Anne, and a more practical side, because this guide is also intended to be a field tool offering practical solutions to commonly encountered problems. And to make sure these guides keep a fit in reality, I shared a lot with the teams, digit teams of the KBR and the State Archives, and I base myself on their difficulties they encounter on a daily basis to create the more accurate document possible. Indeed, and it was quite surprising, that quality, how do I say it, sorry, that even if the states of digitization are well known today and commonplace, it still struggles to find a real echo in the practices of scientific and cultural institutions. And I noticed that digitization is approached very unevenly by libraries, archive services, and museums in Belgium. These institutions face, on one hand, financial issues, as you certainly are aware of it, but also methodological and technical difficulty in carrying out projects that guarantee the legibility and intelligibility of the digital files produced. And that's even for larger structure, who often lack a global vision of the digitization chain, and where I found that information is often fragmented between, on one hand, the technical operators, and on the other, the project manager. And this fragmentation of the information particularly struck me during the series of interviews I conducted, as I said before, and almost all the technical operators asked me why I wanted to talk with them. There were only technical operators, and in their view, they didn't have the strategic and intellectual aims necessary for my work. They were too minimal compared to the manager. And on the other hand, the manager that I spoke to, several actually, had this cognitive vision of the project, of course, but struggled to fully appropriate the more technical parts, which often resulted in an incomplete view of the criteria that make up the quality of images and metadata or the processes to produce them. So by proposing the series of theoretical and methodological tools, the aim of the guide is therefore twofold. On one hand, the objective is to raise awareness of the issue of good governance in digital data and in federal scientific institutions in particular, and more broadly to standardize and harmonize practices within those institutions. And on the other hand, to allow each person involved in the digitization process of a collection or a document to consider their work not at a single step that doesn't connect with anything, but as a part of a production chain with a common objective. In short, the aim is to offer a global perspective and understanding of digitization to make it more qualitative, but also more meaningful to the teams. With this in mind, I chose to develop the guide based on a more global definition of the quality, and more specifically on the standard ISO 9000, also known as Quality Management System, who defines quality as all of the characteristics and properties of a product, a process, or a service that influence its ability to meet identified or implicit requirements. This managerial concept, to better understand and analyze work processes and the results, is based on the method PDCA as plan, do, change, and finally act. In concrete, how does it work? First, you need to create a workflow of the digitization process. You need to modelize the information in order to control it better. Second, you need to define precisely the role and task of each team member. And during the project, to record any errors, anomalies, malfunctionings, and the response to those difficulties. And finally, at the end, to evaluate the project itself in comparison with the past digitization projects in order to correct them and help to improve the following projects. There are many benefits to this managerial technique, mostly to increase the performance of the Digit workshop, and by that, the organization itself, to improve the quality of deliverables, and to take better account of the user's demand and offer them content in line with their expectation. That's all. If properly documented, each digitization can guarantee that the organization action is sustainable over time. So the guide does not approach quality only as the last stage of deliverables production, but rather as a global approach, a guiding thread that leads all digitization processes. And the transposition of this definition therefore means that, one, you need to look at, of course, the production phase of the images, metadata, and the control of those deliverables, but also to pay attention to the cognitive phase. Which is, and we will see later, the definition of the digital data strategy, the digital policy, and the specification. And you need to pay attention really closely to this phase, because from this phase, it will impact the whole chain. Overall, the purpose of digitization is to generate the richest information in order to answer questions and satisfy target audiences while serving the development of the cultural institution offering the service. So this planning phase is rarely well planned and carried out, mostly due to a lack of budget, but also because they don't always know how to proceed and where should go which information. So The first step is to make a diagnosis. What is the purpose of the project? What is the purpose of digitization in your institution? What service does it provide, and how does it contribute to the short, medium, and long-term development of the scientific and cultural institution? Obviously, the approach must be thought according to the technical, human, and financial resources of the institution. To be operational, the system needs to be realistic and not based on fantasized resources. In concrete terms, the answers to those questions should be reflected in 3 documents. First, the digital data strategy that defines, approves, and communicates strategies, policies, standards, architectures, and procedures surrounding data management. The better the data created, classified, and processed by the organization is, and the more readable, relevant, and reliable the information will be. Second document that follows directly from the management system is the digitization policy that brings together all the principles governing the digitization of heritage, documentary, and archival collection. It includes all the procedures for developing and carrying out projects on a more general side, as well as the role of the teams during the process, for instance. And finally, the specification that defines in detail all of the stages of the project. For instance, this document includes a summary of the services to be provided, the presentation of the document to be digitized, their breakdown into batches, the execution deadline, the parameters for calibrating the chain, the procedures to be followed in case of anomalies, etc. In short, it's the plan for conducting the project. Once this strategic foundation is in place, it is natural to look at the deliverables of any project, which are images and metadata. It's on this part of the guide that I try to include as much as possible the work of Tan and Anne, and I try to define what was an image and metadata and what were the criteria that make up quality for those components. A good quality image must meet the requirements for legibility, reliability, and authenticity without falling into what is known as overquality. Overquality is the over-optimization of a product that results in the use of excessive resources and costs to improve the product without real added value. On the contrary, every image produced that does not have sufficiently high level of quality and that spoil the exploitation of digital content must be corrected or rejected. Each criterion is in this chapter defined, detailed, and illustrated to enable technical operators to identify the factors and have a global view of what factors they should pay attention and what they should do in case of anomalies and the room for flexibility they have for it. The part on metadata follows almost exactly the same structure. Metadata are defined in details according to the role and the different criteria that make up the quality of it. The different criteria are then identified as completeness, reliability, granularity, conformity, etc. But this section is also the opportunity to address the issue of dissemination of digital products and therefore the broader issue of their accessibility. The strategic reflection carried out upstream of the project takes here its full meaning because metadata must above all answer questions and make it possible to identify digital content. This potential for digital content to be discovered is one of the indicators of success of the digital strategy developed. The issue of the metadata also raises the question of its interoperability. As a reminder, it is the ability of a product, a system, to interface with another existing system or project without restriction on access or implementation. It has pretty much always been one of the key elements in the evolution of metadata, because we need the information to be readable and usable by different actors in the same sector, whether it's human or machine. And while the notion has long been identified as the key element of the exchange of data between institutions and between sectors, the means to achieve this level of interoperability remains uncertain. So this section is the opportunity to present a few of the developments that the sector is knowing right now, such as the ADOCHS ARM, for instance. After these more technical parts, I chose to talk about the management of the digitization workshop, as our collection that we digitize are often precious and most of it fragile. So a particular attention must be paid to their handling and the environment in order to limit to weaken them during the process. For instance, light is one of the most harmful deterioration factor, as it can alter the perception of color and therefore the reliability of digital reproduction. And finally, for the second half of the guide, the document is divided into 16 methodological sheets that follow the digitization workflow. These sheets cover all the steps involved in developing this type of projects and are divided into 5 categories. First, they are the key concepts, which briefly describe the theoretical elements that were developed more deeply in the first part of the guide, and that have internal references. Practical recommendation, more often in the form of a list. Tools to implement this recommendation. These tools are either based on international standard with a methodological view, or more technical, and are here to allow parts of the automation of the step. They are also bibliographic reference, and finally, when it was relevant, example from international institution. These sheets give, I hope, a clear and easy overview of the elements to be taken in consideration through the production phase. The control of the above-mentioned element is constant and takes place through 3 types of control. First, the visual control, which checks the legibility and aesthetics of the image, and which is really important for post-production phase, such as margin, background color, blurring, etc. The technical control, which consists of checking the technical elements of the digitized content, such as resolution, definition, file formats, metadata, presence of color profile, test pattern analysis, and so on. And finally, integrity or consistency control, which involves checking compliance with models that have been impacted on the integration of images in the digital document management tool. And for instance, you have the tree structure, the file name, the directory name, completeness, etc. To conclude, I'd like to underline that we need a culture that makes clear that digital content is not something that is natural, but constructed. Data is produced and the production process is almost as important as the data itself. Without turning the quality approach into a prison or an endless set of specification, it is a real state to give quality its rightful place in regards of our digital ambitions. It is through the improvement of this process that we will be able to offer a more meaningful digital content. Because it's much more than just about providing a product that meets a specification. By refining the objective of digitization projects, renewing our approach to quality and sharing our practices, we will increase the visibility of cultural content and its research potential. Technological solutions, as important as they are, and today is the proof of that, cannot alone improve the quality of information. Thank you very much for your attention. And for the more practical side of the guide, it is available in 3 languages, English, French, and Dutch, and can be downloaded on the CGSOMA website, only in its English version for now, because the French and Dutch version are still dated and will be available from 13 September.